Now is the time for all American citizens to come to the aid of the Party of True Freedom. Hi, my name is Tommy. I'm Tommy that the Who spoke of. The person who's going to help you to transcend and ascend in consciousness and show you the inner path whereby you will be able to live your life vertically as well as horizontally. The cross being the essence of both vertical and horizontal growth. Singularity states that there is a line pointing from the bottom to the top of infinity, but also horizontally, from the infinity of east to the infinity of west. The very center or the central point of that vector point represents the overcoming of time and space. The more we center ourselves in the very center or the apex of that cross where the two lines meet, the more we're able to keep still. Just like a cameraman is able to line up a shot so perfectly that it hits the mark each time. But the problem with humanity is, in overcoming time and space, is that it wanders from east to west and north to south. Now, in the Moment podcast is myself, Tommy, and Ryan, my chief engineer.
Hello, everybody. Now, in the show prep, I was talking to Tommy, and he had mentioned something about time and space connecting to human consciousness. Would you like to elaborate on that for us?
Well, just like I was talking about on those vector points, time and space in human consciousness is infinite and eternal. However, depending upon your consciousness, it is subject to time. Now, there are different levels of consciousness, from that of still consciousness like rock or metal that vibrates at a very low frequency. And then there's the consciousness of the rock and vegetation that also vibrates at a different frequency, a slightly higher frequency. And then you have animal life, also consciousness, also vibrates at a slightly higher frequency. And then you have man and woman vibrating at different frequencies, higher frequencies. Men vibrate in a wider frequency than women. Women vibrate in a higher frequency than men. The ability to be on the same consciousness at the same time is what helps us all to transcend time and space, such as the internet. The internet is a tool that helps us to transcend time and space. We can do everything from when we're sitting. We can shop, we can go online, we can talk, we can write content. We can bridge the gap of space, but we haven't yet bridged the gap of time. And as you know, internet time takes a long time. And your ability to transcend time, where time is not a factor, represents the highest consciousness in humanity. Of course, animals don't deal with time, but they are not able to look at time or timelessness like humans can.
And not really conscious of time.
Right, they're not conscious of time.
They probably feel it, but they don't think, it's a year, it's a month, it's a minute.
Right. They are aware of time in terms of movement and memory, but they're not aware of logging time the way we log time. The logging of time is inconsequential to the truest form of living. The truest form of living transcends time and space. As many of the yogis practice meditation, they teach themselves to be still. Hence the saying, "Be still and know that I am God." And so the more that we're able to be still, the more likely we are able to transcend in consciousness. Don't forget, the word animal comes from the word anima, which means movement. And that movement that keeps us from being still, like things like making money, competing with one another,
That takes a lot of time.
Yes, that takes a lot of time. And the more we compete with each other in consciousness to get over one another in this monolithic society where only one can be the winner, there can only be one God, and God help the gods because of it. But that's not the case. The case is that if all the gods were operating on the same plane, instead of competing with one another, we'd have cooperation over competition, quality over quantity, and purpose over profit. But the need for profit, the need to get over on each other represents to us the eating up of time. And consciousness needs to be elevated and not devalued. And the more we seek to rule over one another and to lord it over one another, the more we devalue our own consciousnesses. And this is why we have technology, because we think technology is able to bridge the gap. But the gap cannot be bridged through what we see. The gap must be bridged through what we hear. As Tommy in The Who says, put on your visors, put in the cork in your mouth, and put the earpiece over your ears. So it's really like seeing nothing, doing nothing, hearing nothing. As the Tao states, the less we do, the more we accomplish. In other words, the reason why we have technology is to bridge the gap of actions whereby it would consume more time to get the same amount of work done. Am I right? What is your comment on that?
It's pretty interesting to think that in human consciousness, you can meditate and get more done in your mind than being in an awake state. But sometimes you get so caught up in what you're doing in the day-to-day, you feel like you're doing more, but you might not be.
So you think that if a person amasses great fortunes of wealth and keeps their consciousness on amassing great fortunes of wealth, that they might be growing horizontally, but do you think they would be growing vertically?
What's the definition of growing horizontally and growing vertically?
Horizontally is like growing in worldly goods and growing in worldly power. Mm-hmm. And vertical growth is growing in spiritual goods and spiritual power.
Oh, in this day and age, you kind of have to have equal parts of both, don't you think?
Well, yeah. But do you think that everybody en masse has equal parts of both?
No.
Why do you think?
Well, some people have more spirituality and some people have more material wealth.
Okay. We're not saying that material wealth will necessarily block spiritual growth. But the more time you put into something, the better you get at it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's say like an airline pilot has to log a certain amount of hours flying in order to get his license to fly. Mm-hmm. So he's got to put time in.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing with consciousness. The more time we put into consciousness or the ascension of vertical growth, the more we are able to transcend.
And vice versa on the opposite plane.
Exactly. But then there's that time factor again. So what the yogis teach is that the slower we are in our actions, but the more deliberate we are in our consciousness, instead of the other way around. Instead of more deliberate with our actions. Because our actions come from consciousness. And our actions want us to behold something that we can see with our eyes in order for us to think that we've made progress. Because, don't forget, the seeing world represents the majority of the world. The blind world that only listens does not represent the majority of the world. So, the world to a blind man looks much different than the world to a seeing man. And this is why Christ said, be careful of those who think that you see, because those of you who see, or say that you see, are really truly blind.
Now, do you think blind in general are more spiritual?
Just look at Stevie Wonderful. Or just listen, I should say, to Stevie Wonderful.
Well, another interesting thing is that the blind community has a very high unemployment rate. So they're not chasing that material, but maybe they are chasing the spiritual.
They have to. They have to chase the spiritual, because the spiritual comes from what we hear first. We do have what is spoken of in ancient holy writings or poetical writings or philosophical writings or scriptural writings about the golden calf. What is the golden calf? The golden calf represents any kind of existence that takes our mind off the center of where true power comes from. Because the golden calf represents what we can see, what we can touch. But it doesn't represent the word listen. And what is a podcast? What do musicians do mostly is listen. In order to listen, you have to be still in consciousness. Your mind can't be racing around.
Yeah, you can hear something, but to actually listen, you have to stop everything else.
And listening takes determination. And everything in the universe vibrates at a certain frequency. In fact, the ear can hear over 8.5 octaves, almost 9 octaves of sound. But the eye can only see 2 octaves of light. And so, if you begin to understand Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem, that time really isn't a factor. It's just that what we speak about in consciousness that makes time so relevant. It's what we speak about in consciousness that makes time more relevant. But the problem with that is that, as he also states in his incompleteness theorem, that most mathematics is what we really speak about and what we agree about. So we all agree about 1 and 1 equals 2.
But this is all from the perspective of human perception.
Exactly, the human perception. And the human perception is limited because it still operates on an animalistic level with wars and false economics called the false profit, Profit, the false profit. It's the competition over cooperation, the quantity over quality, the profit over purpose. This is all false prophet, antichrist, bestial things that makes us war against each other for domination. And the law of karma states, that is, that anyone who seeks to dominate will be dominated. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction in the universe. And so these actions known as karma, because the word karma comes from the word action, represents wisdom or foolishness. So the more actions that it takes for you to accomplish something, the less wise you truly are. For example, a martial artist would know exactly what punches or deflections to do without wasting energy, so that all of his energy could be in the thrust of what he's doing, rather than succumbing to fear, which causes us to race.
So efficiency is wisdom?
Wisdom is efficiency. You may think that you're efficient by gaining large sums of wealth.
So maybe it's a component of wisdom, is efficiency.
It's a component of wisdom, yes. See, the world has things ass backwards, and this is why the world is in the condition today. And one of the ways that in consciousness the world seeks to use this decadent technology, this golden calf that I've been speaking about, is through the RIF tracking chip that they're trying to make people or seduce people to use, and most effectively through advertising, As you know, we'll probably have to do some editing here. But the chip. We know that the New World Order government has a chip on its shoulder. And that chip on its shoulders is going to want us to take that chip so it can make life easier for Big Brother. But Big Brother ain't a real Big Brother if it's not from the same mother. And a big brother from the same mother is going to do what that brother should be doing to each and every one of us.
But not our big brother.
No, our big brother is a fat-bellied serpent right now that's going to go on his belly, just like God promised to the serpent. The serpent being the most cunning in all of the garden. Once it was erect. Once it sought vertical ascension. But now it's on its belly, only doing horizontal work, seeking to dominate and rule over the people of the earth. Of course, surely as Jesus Christ crushed the head of this serpent, so shall the head of this serpent be crushed. And those who think they are wise will wind up as fools. And those who are fooled will rule over the wise. That's the law of karma. If I come up to you and hit you in the face for no reason, somebody's going to hit me in the face for no reason. And all war is brothers and sisters getting together and annihilating themselves because they're on the same plane of consciousness. The horizontal consciousness of war. Doesn't war sound like whore?
That only takes care of a short-term agenda, and things change. And a generation later, it's something else.
Yeah, a generation or a degeneration. Or, if you're smart and wise, a regeneration. And so,
yeah, that hasn't happened yet.
That hasn't happened yet. So keeping on the same track of certain levels of consciousness, remember that bodies do not really meet, it's minds that meet. The reason why you are in the circle you are in is because you're all of the same mind. Just as musicians get together with musicians, actors with actors, politicians with politicians, nuns with nuns, priests with priests.
Or little boys.
Yes. And true lovers with true lovers. Okay? Not lovers that are trying to use each other for their own advancement or agenda. That's another level of consciousness.
It's another topic for
It's
another
another
show.
topic, right. But we're talking about consciousness and the idea to transcend time and space because you're on the same page. This is what the internet tries to do. It tries to get us on the same page all over the world at once. But we're still touching technology. The word technology comes from the word science of touch. Techno, touch. Knowledge, knowledge is what we get the word knowledge. See, it sounds alike. Tech, touch. Knowledge.
Well, by the time you can touch someone on the other side of the world, I don't think anyone's going to leave their house.
Okay, so we know that we all have the power to maybe press a computer keyboard, or make music with keys on the keyboard. But when we touch somebody, do we have the power to heal? How farly advanced we are as a civilization to have that much power? And there are people who have that power because they know exactly what to do with their hands. So the idea of transcending consciousness from the lower levels to the mid levels to the high levels, of course, all of the universe has these base frequencies, these mid-range frequencies, and these high-range frequencies that yet as humans we have yet to accomplish in listening to, because we're all led around by our eyes. And people who see or think they see want to seize control of our government and make us take this RIF tracking chip to help them bridge time and space so they can know our every movement. They can track us wherever we are, and so they can try to simulate omniscience. Because we know that spiritually, God has a triumvirate of ability. God is omnipotent, God is omniscient, and God is omnipresent.
Well, you get enough information about somebody, you can pretty much sell them anything. And that's what advertisers have been doing for years, but now the government wants in on it at the next level.
Right, because what advertising does, it appeals to the subconscious level, the dream level. And on the dream level, or the alpha realm, is where we all are basically alike. This is why people like to go out and drink and get high, because it puts them on the same page easier. And this is why they call liquor spirits, because it puts them on the same spirit. If you get 2 guys or 3 guys drinking Jameson all night, pretty soon they're going to be thinking alike.
And hugging.
And hugging and kissing, exactly. So the idea of true consciousness is being able to attain everything that we want to attain regardless of technology. The aim of technology is not to make more technology, it's to reduce technology. For the less technology we need, the higher we are in ascension. Do you understand that?
Yeah. What is your take on biology and technology merging to become one?
Okay. There are 2 types of fruit on that tree of
And
the knowledge.
is it considered the next evolution, or is it an abomination?
Well, evolution.
Are we going to create our own evolution? The next step humans take, is it going to be created by us through technology?
Okay, technology is created by us. Technology also, because it's created by us, is able to create us in a way. But
It certainly shapes our lives.
it shapes our lives. But the reason is that on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, instead of the knowledge of good and excellence, states that your reasons for trying to make this kind of biotechnology must be altruistic and for the benefit of mankind and selfless. If it's not,
In theory.
in theory and in action, because if it's not, if somebody uses this technology to try to get over or try to be profitable, this technology will backfire on them.
I like to believe in the greater good of people when it comes to things like this.
Right,
But
the greater good.
a few evil people can grab some power, take it, and really do some damage. And we've certainly seen that in politics.
Exactly. So let's stick to what we're talking about, the RIF chip.
Mm-hmm.
That tracking chip,
That's basically the combination of biology and technology.
Right, in one.
But also for the benefit of someone probably not too good, someone that's not going to use it for good.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that when you have a small amount of people in the world that are trying to dominate a large amount of people, and for their own benefit by amassing 95% of the wealth and giving 95% of the people only 5% of the wealth, you have a mad scientist. You don't have a glad scientist. You have somebody who's abusing his environment in order to gain power over his environment or her environment. And warmongers and, see, warriors, people who love wars and people who are into horrors are only out for themselves. They're not really out to help other people. And there are only two ways to live in the world, altruistically or not. The more altruistically we live, the higher we will ascend in the vertical ascent. And a lot of people feel it's not possible. You're being impractical. Well, sooner or later, it'll take them many reincarnations to learn this lesson, if they don't learn it now. In the 1928 stock market crash, people were willingly throwing themselves out of the windows because all of the schemes of their fortunes backfired on them. And those people who make the RIF chip are going to experience the same thing. There's going to be a demise of power. So swift, more swift than a tsunami could ever damage every coastal city in the world. Why? Because karma has a way of reversing itself really fast. And the reversal of fortune is what happens.
Instant karma?
Yes. In fact, it's happening more and more as we go. The more we accelerate in progress, the more we accelerate in karma. One goes with the other. So if thousands of people are going to war and killing each other, they're actually reducing the numbers of the world by that act of foolishness, by succumbing to their lower consciousnesses, the baser instincts.
Reptilian brain?
Yes, more like that. And, the law of the jungle. But even in the jungle, the law of karma still prevails. For I will require the blood of every animal that sheds the blood of every animal. That's already written. We can't escape that. And so those who ascend in consciousness are able to understand the law of action, the law of karma. And the law of karma and the law of commerce are also linked up together. For the more we give, the more we receive. It is in giving that we receive, and this is the reason why that people prosper.
Well, how much do you have to ascend in consciousness to realize that killing people is a bad thing?
Well, you'd have to be ascended in consciousness long enough to keep still and listen to what I'm saying. So those who consider themselves wanting to get what they want right away and be willing to go to war for it are actually creating the opposite of what they want. And transcending time and space comes from not being fooled by that illusion. The illusion being that I need more space for myself, so I'm going to go into another country and expand my space and create an empire. Which in the end, we know that every empire has fallen. Okay? That has sought to lord it over.
Well, again, it's short-term thinking.
Right, short-term thinking. And only altruistic thinking is eternal and infinite thinking. This kind of thinking is the only thinking that survives. As Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So the way you think, the way you are, is the way you will act. Thoughts, words, and deeds. The mathematician has a thought, writes it down on the chalkboard, and then talks it over with the other scientists. Then the other scientists get together and decide to make a collegium of at least 10 men, a minion, and put into action what they thought about and spoke about. And so what they do is hire people under them to make or manufacture what they think should be making them ascend to a higher level of consciousness. But in many cases, it doesn't, as we know by the Oppenheimer quartet that first formed the first atom bomb. They thought they were ascending in consciousness, but look what happened.
Well, they certainly realized it real quick that they had just created a monster.
Yes.
And I know a lot of the guys were pretty depressed after having seen what they did discover and wish they could put the genie back in the bottle.
Speaking about the bottle, here's a bottle of Darwin water. Dare to win the winning life by daring to evolve. Are you willing to dare?
And what's the website for the water?
Are you willing to dare? DarwinWater.com.
How do you spell that?
DarewinWater.
All right.
Like Darwin, but Darwin.
And final thoughts for the show?
Drink more water. No, we're all connected by water. And our thoughts make the water in our bodies vibrate at a certain frequency. Hence, people look the way they do just because of the way they think.
Looking through the lens, the filter of water.
Exactly. And as Goethe says, that our point of view might be definitely disturbed by the kind of water that we have within us that is used to focus through this watery lens that makes us see the sun as yellow when it's actually emerald. If you look at the sunset when it's going down, you'll see the very color of the sun just as before it's going down. But the human eye sees differently. We are saline solutions of water. We're basically 95% water. Interspersed with neuron receptors and transmitters that govern the amount of electrical energy that goes through us. And the baser you are, the less electrical energy you have, actually. And the higher you are in ascension, the more electrical energy is able to pass through your body, just by keeping your spine straight and concentrating on the breath of life going into the nostrils and out through your mouth, and then bringing the consciousness from the base of the spine all the way up to the crown chakra of the head, and suspending yourself as if you're being suspended by strings. And our thoughts pluck the strings of the music of our life by our motivations. As every acting teacher will say to every acting student, what is your motivation? And if the motivation of technology is to truly help people rather than get over on people, we will survive as a species. But the more we use technology to get over on each other, the more we're succumbing to this golden calf that Moses eventually made Aaron melt down and have the people drink the molten liquid. Whether that necessarily or literally happened is not the point. The point, poetically speaking, is that the motivation that you use to get over in the world is the very food you will eat. And the reason why Adam and Eve picked that fruit that was forbidden was the very motivation that they sought for themselves. They will make us wise, knowing that we are as gods, knowing both good and evil. And God warned them. If you want to know what good and evil is about, try good and excellence over good and evil. Because you don't necessarily have to live from that evil fruit. You can still ascend without having to partake of that. And the partaking of a lower consciousness where you have profit over purpose, when you have competition over cooperation, when you have quantity over quality, is the very reversal of the fortune that you seek. And so the reason why when yogis get together or these ascended masters get together and there is no war amongst them but just total peace compared to a bunch of soldiers having a bare room brawl, that is the very factor that will either make you vertical in ascent or horizontal. It's up to you. And the more we center on others over ourselves, the more we're going to be able to bridge this gap of time and space by the moral decisions we make, not the immoral ones. The moral decision is to love your brother and sister. The immoral one is to get over on your brothers and sisters. What do you think about that in the music industry?
Oh, we're going to start a whole new topic, and we're just about running out of time.
Did you say time? There we go again, thinking that time is a factor. The one thing that we should think of more than anything else is the purpose of why we're here and where we're going. Are you going up or are you going the other way? Are you living a timeless life and an eternal one, or is your time running out? This is Tommy and the Whoever with Ryan Canastro, wishing you all a very timeless life.